Hello, everyone, and welcome to Food Tank's webinar series. I apologize for the delay in us getting started. We had some technical difficulties this morning, but my name is Sarah Small, and I'm Food Tank's Chief of Staff, and thanks for hanging around. I'm really excited about today's webinar with Neil Blomquist. He is the Managing Director in the United States of the Natural Habitats Group. Neil has also had a long career in the natural foods industry, from his roots as the owner of a natural food stores in Kalispell, Montana, to helping shape organic certification guidelines in the United States, to holding the post of President and Chief Executive Officer for Spectrum Organic Products. Today, Neil's presentation will discuss palm oil, and he'll begin to answer the questions: can palm oil be grown and produced sustainably, and what are the true costs of doing so? This webinar will be recorded and posted on foodtank.com afterwards. You can also follow along and participate on Twitter using hashtag #FoodTank. Also, please do submit your questions using the chat box in your control panel, or email them to me, Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, @foodtank.com. So without further ado, Neil, it's wonderful to have you here today, and I'm excited to hear your presentation. I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you, Sarah. It's nice to be able to have the opportunity to tell this story. The palm oil story really began back in the 50s and 60s when the food scientists figured out how to turn liquid oils that could be grown in the United States, like soybean and corn and sunflower and safflower and so on, and turn it into a hard fat through hydrogenation. And as a result of that science and a lot of lobbying by food scientists and the food industry, tropical oils were essentially pushed out of the United States market, and they had been used for many years as a alternative to hard fats from dairy products and from meat, as an alternative for various products from spreads and sauces and so on. And for many, many years, all tropical fats were considered to be really bad fats for health, and were essentially not available in any form in the United States. When I was CEO of Spectrum, and I really got a chance to study the truth about saturates and the role that they play, especially plant saturates, I started to understand the other side of the story. And in 2002, I had the opportunity to work with a supplier of organic palm oil out of Colombia to introduce the first organic palm oil into the United States in a partnership with Spectrum. And we introduced organic palm oil for sale in bulk form to bakeries and food processors. And we also developed the first organic palm shortening for consumers, and that product is still sold under the Spectrum brand in the United States market. And it's an alternative to Crisco and butter and so on for baking, and a very popular product with consumers now that the whole palm oil story is being told in a different way from the health side. I think what's important to understand, and maybe we can go to slide 2, Sarah, the palm oil is so prevalent in the United States food and personal care and soap markets. It's in so many products that we use, and the average consumer doesn't understand that it's one of those ingredients that is so prolific in the food supply and in the supply on the cosmetics and personal care and home care products, that it's something that is important that we understand what the supply chain represents and where the problems are and what some of the solutions are. And when you look at how palm oil in its predominant amount, where it's grown and where it's processed, which is in Malaysia and Indonesia, there are a lot of problems with that supply chain. And the NGOs have done a great job of getting that information out to the public, and rightly so, because there's a lot of things that are being done in parts of the world in how palm oil is grown and produced that is a real problem. And what we have been doing at Natural Habitats is finding a solution through the way that palm oil is produced, the way that it's processed, the way that it goes to market. And one of the things that has been my personal, I would say, mission is to try to tell the other side of the story, because it is an amazing story. Palm oil is one of the most sustainable sources of fat that can be grown on the planet. And slide 2 describes how much palm oil can be produced on a hectare of land compared to other fats. And the efficiency of palm oil in terms of what it can produce on a per hectare basis or per acre basis by comparison is tremendous. And aside from the benefit that comes from land use in parts of the world where palm oil is grown, South America, anywhere around the equator is essentially where it's grown. There are a lot of farmers in the world that depend on palm oil as a source of income for their farming. It's a very productive source of income for them. And what we're finding is that when we work with small farms in Ecuador, the application of organic growing methods increases yield tremendously. It provides the farmers with a whole new approach to looking at how the land can be productive by teaching them how to create living soil. We have agronomists that are in the field every day working with the farmers to teach them how to grow other things on their farms, because you can do a lot more when you're growing organically to do multi-cropping versus just growing palm. So it has all these upside benefits, and that story is not being told. Maybe we can go through some other slides here, Sarah, to talk about some of the benefits. We are really trying to promote the nutritional side of palm oil that is not refined, called red palm, is one of the highest sources of beta carotene and vitamin E of any oil that's found. So we have been, with our branded partners, promoting red palm oil as a culinary oil that can be used in the kitchen every day. The next slide talks about what makes natural habitats palm oil different. All of the palm oil that's produced for the U.S. market is coming from Ecuador. There are 130 small family farms that are producing the oil. It's not a large plantation kind of growing situation. There's a dedicated mill to press the oil that is 100% organic in everything that moves through that plant. It's located right near the farms, so there's fresh oil being produced every day. Minimal processing is being done to make it in a form that can be brought into the U.S. market and used for a variety of applications in the organic food industry, from cookies to crackers, all kinds of snack products. It's an excellent oil for frying, for chips, popcorn, just about anything in that realm performs very well with palm oil. If we go to slide 5, this kind of compares palm done wrong to what we're doing on the palm done right side. None of the palm that's being grown in Ecuador is grown on habitat that is virgin rainforest. There's very strict laws in Ecuador that control and keep virgin rainforest from being turned into farmland. So all of the farms are second and third generation farms that have been in families for a long time. So it really protects the ecosystem and creates a habitat for animals and other plants to flourish very much in harmony with the rainforest. It's a very diverse ecosystem there. All of the programs around organic are about revitalization of the soil. We've got programs that turn byproducts from the pressing of the oil back into compost. So there's a lot of work being done with the farmers to enrich the soil there. The whole project is fair trade certified, which means that there are fair wages paid. There's a percentage of all of the sales that go back to the community. So there's been investments that have been made in social projects within those communities to help the local people. The other really exciting thing is that it increases the yields of the palm fruit from the farmers as they really get into growing organically, and the soil enrichment programs and so on are producing higher yields for the farmers, which is for them more income. And it also incentivizes them to look at organic as very much a part of where they see their future. If we go to slide 6, you can kind of see some of the impact that's going on with conflict, what we call conflict palm. And what's going on in Indonesia and Malaysia is very much controlled by very large corporate interests. And because Indonesia and Malaysia are difficult countries to control regulations, there have been attempts at trying to control regulations through a industry-sponsored program called RSPO. It is a certification program that has good intentions, but it's been very difficult to enforce. And it's been a big part of what the environmental groups have been really pushing and railing on the industry about, still having this continued problem of rainforest destruction and animal destruction and so on. So these are just some additional pictures, slide 7, showing some of the devastation that's going on in Indonesia. And one of the other key things that organic farming does is it keeps glyphosate, which is Roundup, out of the environmental system, which enables you to grow other crops and creates a much healthier ecosystem. So if we go to slide 9, we're talking about now palm that's farmed sustainably. You can see some photos here. Slide 10 shows what happens with the soil when you're growing cover crops that increase in nitrogen content. You would not see this in conventional farming. You have essentially pretty bare ground around the trees. And here you're seeing soil enrichment, which also holds moisture better and provides nutrients for the plants. In slide 11, you can see what a healthy palm forest looks like when it's being grown organically. Slide 12, this is one of our farmers. We've had a number of trips that we've taken with folks from the United States and from our customer base in Europe that have come to spend time with the farmers. And we had a trip last fall that kind of kicked off the Palm Done Right program and was kind of an incubator for a lot of the ideas that were used to develop this program. And a lot of the ideas have come from farmers. Slide 13 has the same farmer showing his pride in being a certified organic farmer. Slide 14 talks about the multi-cropping side. You can see this is a young plantation and it's intercropped with passion fruit and cacao. As the palm trees get bigger, a lot of the multi-cropping moves to another part of the farm. But it's given the farms another source of income. And the passion fruit and cacao are also being grown organically, of course. Slide 15, just a picture about biodiversity. When you get into these farms, you see an amazing amount of plant and animal life that you wouldn't see in a conventional growing environment. In this particular farm, they have a dairy operation, and animals are part of the ecosystem that's been created there. In fact, they're using on this farm the manure to create a compost tea that's very, very enriching for the soil. And the farmer has been sharing these techniques with other organic farms. in the area to be able to help other farms become better at what they do. That's the other beauty of this program. Even though these are all small, independent family farms, we've created essentially a community that interacts and helps each other create more success, better yields, improved methods of growing, etc. It's really a wonderful thing to see. Slide 17 shows how pests are dealt with. This is a very simple trap to take care of some of the pests. It's made with molasses, pineapple, and sugarcane. It attracts the pests and keeps them from attacking the plants. Here's another farmer. This is the farmer that has the cattle. He's been very innovative, and you can see behind him the containers of compost tea that he makes that uses a combination of byproducts from the pressing of the oil from the mill that's near his farm. And he combines that with composted steer manure to create this incredibly intense, nutrient-rich fertilizer that he can put on his farm, and he's sharing this method of producing with other farmers. Slide 19, this is his wife, who's very happy about the organic passion fruit that they're producing on that same farm. Here's another shot of the containers of compost tea that's made from the palm fiber and composted cow manure. Here you can see the harvesting of the fruit. You can see that it's all done by hand. There are actual animals used instead of heavy equipment to go into the field to be able to retrieve the palm oil, and this keeps the ecosystem much more balanced. Here you can see they're collecting the fruit in a donkey-driven cart to bring the fruit to the collection point, where it's then trucked to the plant where it's pressed. So you can see here the palm fruit that's piled up in front of the pressing plant. This plant is located near the farms in the Esmeraldas region of Ecuador. It's in the northwest part of the country. And it's a wholly owned plant that's owned by Natural Habitats and only produces and presses organic fair trade palm oil. So there's no chance of intermingling conventional oil in this plant. You can see some of the team that works out of there. There are 4 full-time agronomists that work with farmers to both navigate through the organic certification programs and to help them create skills to be better farmers. Natural Habitats also has a loan program to help farmers get started, because there's always a transition period before they can become organic. They have to go through a transition of a minimum of 2 years. So during that period, there are loans available to help farmers transition to be fully organic. This is a photo of, on the next slide, slide 25, of some of the local benefits that come out of this program. Natural Habitats has a close relationship with a nearby school, and they've been helping fund programs for the children. They've provided laptops to help raise their technology skills and to provide a way for them to be able to do things like learn how to dance and play soccer instead of just coming to school to learn the basics. So there's a real mission connection between Natural Habitats and what its company mission is, what the values of the company are, and how that translates to growing a community of support, both on the supply side and with our customers in the United States and in Europe. We are building a customer base of value-aligned brands and companies that are very set on the same kind of objectives we have, which is to grow palm oil in a sustainable way that has even advantages over growing soybeans in the United States. because of the nature of how it's grown and the level of sustainability that comes with it. Palm done right is a story that needs to be told. And we are now in the first stages of really rolling this out in the form of a very robust website. We've got our partners participating, and we're going to be reaching out to people like you in this audience to help spread the word that there's a really incredible story to be told. So we look forward to your support, and I'm ready for questions and answers.
Thank you, Neil, and that was a really informative presentation. I appreciate you going through all of that, and we do have a lot of questions from our listeners, so for the next 10 minutes or so, we'll go through as many as possible. So I'd like to start by asking you a question from our listener. His name is Steven, and he asks, are the growers in Ecuador able to get the same yields as elsewhere where a lot of nitrogen inputs are being used? In Malaysia, the large farms are using a lot of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers to increase yields, especially on former rubber plantations.
Yeah, yields are definitely higher when you're switching from conventional methods. There's two types of conventional farmers in countries like Ecuador. There are small farms that have virtually no input because they can't afford it, and they're using the same methods that their parents and grandparents used to try to get as much yield as possible. And there's some sustainable approaches that are being used because they learn by experience. And then there are other farmers who are influenced heavily by the chemical companies to use chemical fertilizers and herbicides. And what we're seeing is that after the transition to organic and some time to really develop soil fertility, their yields are up 35% or higher over time because of the increased nutrition that's in the soil. The availability of nutrients is so much higher when it's being grown with these organic methods.
Thank you, Neil. And the next question comes from Allison, and she wants to know what kind of economic investment and investment of time is required to switch to organic farming in these regions, and how widespread is sustainable palm farming now in comparison to conventional?
Well, let me answer the first part of the question. What kind of investment is required? And I mentioned that there are loans available to the farmers to make that transition. Because during that transition period, they're still having to sell the fruit that they're producing to conventional buyers because it can't be certified organic until it goes through that transition period. At the same time, they are investing in making the transition from conventional farming to organic. So it means that they are all of a sudden stopping the application of chemical fertilizers and herbicides, and they may see a dip in their yields for a period of time until the organic methods really start to have an impact on improving fertility of the soil. That takes time. So that investment is more around helping support the farmers through that period of seeing their yields drop before they start to come back and get higher as they become organic farmers. The other investment is more hand labor is required, so it may mean that the farmers have to have more help on the farm to do things that are more mechanical rather than using chemicals. So that's where the investment side comes in. What was the other part of the question, Sarah?
She also asked, excuse me, I can find it. How widespread is sustainable palm farming now in comparison to conventional?
Well, I would say that organic farming is less than 1% of the world's palm oil production. It's probably closer to 0.5%. It's still in a very early stage. Where most of the palm oil in the world is produced, which is Indonesia and Malaysia, it's I think it's more 85 to 88% of the world's palm oil. There's zero being done organically there. I think that it would be very difficult to implement organic. We've actually studied and looked at where in the future it might fit, and we would love to participate in pioneering organic in that part of the world. But it's so controlled by big corporate interests, and that whole base of small farms is so difficult to reach and manage. It would be very difficult to do it there. So all of the organic palm that's being grown in the world right now comes from South America, Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador. And it's growing. And as the companies that are involved in growing and promoting organic grow the demand, we're going to continue to add more farmers to the supply chain. And we've got always a transition group of farmers coming in because the company's sales are growing 60 to 70% a year. It's a great sign. And we're doing everything we can on the supply side to manage continuing to grow with more farmers supplying fruit so that we can keep that growth. But it's going to be a slow process.
Great, thanks, Neil. And then Stephen wants to know a little bit more about soil health. And I'll add on to his question a little bit too, but he first writes, the northwest section of Ecuador is dry forest separated from rainforest by the Andes. Does this region not have different soils than in tropical forests like in Brazil and Indonesia where soils are poorer in nutrients? And so I think I'll just add on to that. So do you foresee organic palm production being exclusive to South America, or is it also possible in places where the soil is different and there's also a lot of production already happening?
It's possible to do it anywhere where palm is grown. In order for palm fruit to be grown effectively, there has to be a level of elevation below, 400 or 500 feet above sea level. They do not do well getting it, trying to grow palm much above sea level. And it needs a certain amount of rain in order to have enough moisture and temperature control to be able to produce effectively. It can't have, for example, temperature fluctuations that are significant. It's got to have an average mean temperature that's relatively high, much like rainforest conditions, to be able to be productive. I mean, you can grow these trees in other conditions, higher elevation, less rain, but they aren't going to produce fruit in a way that is manageable from a productive standpoint. So I think that the best answer is yes, anywhere where conventional palm is being grown effectively, you can do organic. And once you really start to create a live environment with healthy soil that retains water better and nutrients better, it's going to improve both the yield and the overall ecosystem where the trees are grown. So you could transition large plantations in Indonesia, for example, to organic, and it would be a huge benefit, a big step, if it could ever get done.
Thanks, Neil. And I think that the story that you've told through your presentation is maybe a different side than what most of us see. And so this listener wants to know and writes, so when I'm at the grocery store, I read all my labels, and based on the media I've seen, I put products back on the shelf if they are made with palm oil. How can I as a consumer know whether the palm is produced sustainably or is increasing deforestation, etc.?
The best way is to choose products that are using organic and fair trade certified palm oil. That will assure you that it's coming from a part of the world that produces palm oil sustainably. Organic in itself, and the philosophy of what organic represents and the practical application of what organic represents is a big portion of what makes palm done right, a good choice for a consumer. The other components that are also important are the social side of growing palm oil and helping the communities where it's grown and working with small farms in those communities through a program like Fair for Life, which is what Natural Habitats uses as part of its certification program, where a percentage of everything that we sell goes back to community programs, because these communities are in real need of that kind of support. They're small towns and small farmers that don't have access to a lot of what you and I experience here in the United States, availability of healthcare and food choices and so on. So it's a real benefit.
Thanks, Neil. And we'll just have time for one more question. And we've had several asking more about the Palm Done Right campaign. So if you could just let our listeners know kind of more information on what projects and programs that the campaign has engaged in so far this year, but also where they can find information and become involved if they're interested.
Well, the best thing to do is to go to the website, www.palmdoneright.com. And we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram connections, and we'd love to have you follow us. We're going to be very actively populating the social media programs with information as we gather it. We'll be posting studies as we start to produce our own results from work that we're doing, both on the nutritional side and on the farming side, and other work that's being done in the world to support the premise of Palm Done Right. We're going to be working with nutritionists and chefs, anyone that is using oil in a kitchen that can understand where palm oil can fit, and how it is a both healthy substitute as well as a functional substitute for other hard fats if you're baking or producing snack products or whatever the case might be. And the other big part of what we're focused on in its early stage is getting organic palm products into the personal care and home soap markets. We're currently working with Dr. Bronner's right now is one of our key branded partners, and they're using our palm oil to produce a lot of their liquid soaps. So that whole area of personal care is so undiscovered, and it's another area where we want to help both educate and promote for the companies that are using palm oil to switch to a more sustainable source.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we are running right out of time, and I just want to also thank all of our listeners for sending in their questions, and it was truly a pleasure to have you here. We will have another webinar coming up on Wednesday, June 29th. You can find more details on foodtank.com under our events section. And thank you to everyone today for tuning in. And Neil, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.